Hey friend, Megan here. The chickens say hello. I am going to give you guys an update on our newest move in Peru, give some backstory of what's going on politically in Peru, as well as some backstory about some of the challenges and where we are located now. So let's see. We are at Project Muyu. It's an ecological project that has been here that we actually first moved into to help transition us to our tiny home. Um, this project is amazing. This project is focused on community and planting and biodiversity and coming together as a community, bees, planting trees, water wheels. They're doing really, really cool stuff. They were going through this enormous shift when we moved in, and they were so wonderful to offer us a place to live for a couple months while we were getting the new house livable. So what happened is we were transitioning, and the transition was tricky because they were still running their project. They had a shared kitchen. We had to go cook our food over at the other house as we were figuring out where everything was. The move was a crazy kind of explosion of our stuff and our schedule and living with new people. So it wasn't going to make sense for us to live there, and we already had a place set up in the, like right next door. But right next door is still hectares away, so it's like a 5 to 10 minute walk through the jungle. So we lived here at the project. We transitioned over kind of slowly, and originally we had electricity, we had water, we had our compost potty set up, all sorts of things, and we're like, okay, we can do this. And we did it. We did it for a year. During that year, we learned so much. We learned so much about ourselves. We learned so much about living here, and the lifestyle that we were starting to develop. So, what does that look like? It looked like, actually, I'll get into the learnings in a little bit. So that was why we didn't initially move, and also the project here was going through a huge transition after the pandemic, and there was a death of the original owner who died. So there were new owners that had come in, actually just one, along with the children of the owner who had died, kind of were coming together figuring out what this project was going to be. So it didn't make sense for us to live here, and we didn't really know them that well. So they also received funding from a university in Lima, and that sort of contract and agreement was also going through a lot of shifts. So they didn't really know what the future of the project was, which direction it was going in, and they were just giving us a hand by giving us a room. Well, during this year, we've become really good friends with them, and some new people have come in to help out, including a son of one of the local families here who knows a ton about growing here, and he's just a wealth of knowledge, and a dear, dear friend with a huge heart. So a lot happened in this last year where things are being revealed, uncovered, and shown to us that we did want to eventually move here. So what happened when we moved to the little tiny house, as I call it? It was like a 1 bedroom adobe structure with tin roof. There were no screens. I'm doing a video, my love. There were no screens in the windows. The walls did not close up to the roof, so it was just a very open air structure. With, like I said, 1 bedroom where we basically, our furniture kind of got lost. It was in storage. It's not lost, but it was just very difficult to get to. So we had just beds on the floor. We moved with 4 dogs, 3 little boys, and yeah, concrete floors, and us laying on our mattresses. So why didn't we just invest right into the property and start to build it out? That was kind of our plan, was to be like, all right, I think we're going to be able to purchase this land. We're going to be able to build out this house. So this is just a temporary structure as we figure out possibly purchasing this piece and starting to build out a lofted bed and some extensions and things like that. It took about 6 months for us to find out that we were not able to buy that piece, that it was not available anymore. Sometimes proving conversations can be a little bit lacking full disclosure and information, and it's really about developing the relationship and building trust to find out all of the details. So it took a long time to realize that we were not going to be able to purchase it. The other thing is, right before we moved, our youngest son got sick, and he was in the hospital, and it was a long recovery and a scary recovery. That delayed our move, and we also had hospital bills. So all of the money that we had saved for the transition and the move, as well as not being able to work for that time, it just depleted all of our funds, like all of our funds down to almost nothing. So we moved into this place without really having a whole lot of resources at all, which was really hard. And definitely didn't make the transition to sort of like building it out more comfortably very easy. So that said, we still just kind of kept chugging away and kept going. Now, we had electric there. It was actually this old handshake agreement with the guy who owned the place and this project with the old owner to share solar, because the place where we were living, a grandfather had passed. He had passed for 3 years. There was still a debt on the account that kept going up, even though nobody was using it. So nobody was willing to pay the electric bill, and we didn't have the money to pay it either. So they weren't going to turn the electric back on, but it was okay because we had this solar connection. During this last year, the solar connection went through levels and levels of challenges, from their batteries sort of depleting. They do go through a life cycle. Some of the, like, just the weirdest things happen, things that we could never, ever, ever have guessed. The cables just fell one day. They had to rewire their whole system, and when they rewired it, they pulled it away from a project that was in between ours that was leading the electricity to our house. They had to pull it back because everybody was out of electricity. So it was their investment, it was their project, it was their solar equipment, and so they had to rearrange to make sure that they had electric at their project. So we ended up getting this low depletion where it was like, okay, 5 o'clock at night, electric goes out. Back in the morning at 5 o'clock in the morning. And so we kind of got used to it. It was this slow decline where we're like, all right, here's how we're going to use the fridge. We're going to keep it closed to keep the cold in. And then that stretched and stretched longer and longer hours, that we were only getting a few hours of electricity. And then that's when they rearranged the equipment. And the day they rearranged equipment, all of the wires had fallen. So it was just like bam, 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 strange and wild timing, but we were left without electricity. So then we were talking to the family, okay, we can get it back up. If we change the names, and we have to get the people down here, and Peruvian utilities, Peruvian businesses don't work like Western businesses where you can just call them up and somebody comes. It's much more complex than that. So we were thinking we were going to be able to transfer the name and actually get electric at the house, but it just went week after week, month after month, where nothing was happening and we were not able to get it. So during this time, we were like, okay, we can live with candles. We were really learning what it's like to live without electricity, off grid, no refrigeration. So, we do a lot of food where we have leftovers and we can do quick meals, and that just all of a sudden was off the table. So we went through all sorts of transitions learning how to live without electricity. And luckily, we still were able to come over and charge our stuff at the project like once a day, and then we'd have a couple hours on our phones or our laptops, and that was it. So the other thing is we didn't have hot showers. We didn't have hot showers this entire year because we had originally purchased an electric shower. It didn't work on the solar system because the solar system was dying. And so we were coming back here. We were boiling water for the boys to do tub baths, things that I don't think people could really even imagine. And you would try to get everything hot, and then it would start raining, and the boys wouldn't want to get in a shower. I mean, it was nuts. So lots of challenges on top of the heat, on the top of the humidity, on top of the bugs, on top of having just an open air structure where dust is just flying into the house. So everything we owned was just covered in dirt. There's also no patio there. That was one of our plans, to have an outdoor patio so we could eat outside, make a little more space in the house. None of that could happen. It just stopped. We didn't have the financial means. We didn't have the go ahead on building because we didn't know if we could buy it. So there was so much just wait and see. And during that time, we were looking for other places to live. But down here, there's not a big rental market. There's no rental market. Most people have moved out of the campo, out of the jungle and the fields. They moved towards the towns, into the cities. And so there aren't really a whole lot of houses any different than what we've got. Lots of tiny little adobe structure sheds for people who are coming down, working in the farms, and heading back up to their house in town. So there really wasn't a huge rental market. We saw some places, they were either really huge built out places or just empty land where we'd have to build from scratch. So nothing was really clicking for us. We were trying to figure it out. Now during this year, what also happened was that Peru's economy was building back up, tourism was building back up, so the project was planning to rent spaces. We were working to, rebuild our funds, and then all of a sudden the paro happened. The paro, when I say paro, it's like a strike, and people can't even imagine what a strike is like in South America, especially Peru, where there is a history of people marching and shutting things down, all roads being blocked, closing up stores, and saying, listen to our voice or we do not allow anything to move. So that's what the history of the paro, or the strike, is. And this one was nationwide. And this one came because there has been, I won't get too into Peruvian history, but there's been like 6 presidents in the last 5 years, I believe. And there's a lot of division right now in the country that's being fueled by a lot of kind of outside sources. But there's a massive discontent with any kind of outside government forces coming in and deciding what to do with Peru, its resources, with its people, and with its policy. And that's a lot coming from the pueblo, from the campo. And so the small towns, the countryside, instead of the cities. So there's this division between people that live kind of more out in nature and older ways of living, and people that have moved to the cities, which has all happened in the last couple generations. It's all very, very recent. So there was already a ton of political instability. Well, Peru had elected its first indigenous local president. He was a man from in the Andes in the Sierra, and he was a teacher, and he supported agriculture, and so he was elected, and there was a lot of political unrest. There was a lot of impeachment challenges, a lot of pointing fingers about corruption, and it caused a ton of an already inflamed and stable situation to go pretty explosive. So he was removed from power by the Congress, and he was sort of, the talks were that he was really wanting to change some of the policy, and he got removed. Well, the people were not happy with that, and I think it's something like 76% of the country wanted him to be in power, and yet he got removed by the political system that had already been there. And there's a long history of the Shining Path, if you want to look it up. There's a long history of Western governments coming in for policy, for business and capitalism in their gains. But people weren't happy about it, so they took to the streets. They took to the streets for 2 straight months, and it hasn't even stopped. It's been going in waves of strength. So during that time, there were gas shortages. There were cooking gas shortages and gasoline shortages, which meant transport was starting to grind to a halt. They took down Machu Picchu. They closed the doors of Machu Picchu for a couple weeks. They had closed different airports. There was a lot of unrest. There was a lot of violence in the street. Many of the marches I saw were really just indigenous ladies with their mantas and their dresses, their little carrying fabrics and their dresses, feeding each other in the plazas. But there was definitely a lot of violence that took to the streets, and there were a lot of people that were so tired of the economy being shut down, so there was a ton of pushback on the marches, and here we are. So during that time that we didn't have electric, then all of a sudden our cooking gas got taken as well. So we started taking down with the community dead trees and learning how to cook on the open fire, and then we got lent a rocket stove. So At that point, you don't have a laundry machine, you don't have a place to charge, you don't have a place to do hot water for showers or baths or tea. Food preparation becomes very difficult. Staying clean in general, just wiping it off your house becomes difficult. Our water was also outside, about 20 steps away, at an outdoor sink. And so there was just a lot of back and forth through that mud, through that dust, to keep things going. So we did that for months and months and months. And then the last month of it was cooking on the wood stove. So it was, I shared this on social media. It was never, ever our plan to come live here without utilities. But being able to say that we did it was pretty profound, really difficult, and also very fulfilling. And it also made me value the modern conveniences and luxuries that we do have. So it's hard to even get into some of the details of how much we learned this year, how much we learned about how our neighbors live, and that's normal for them. When I was kind of asking, friends, what's going on with gas? Is gas coming in? They're like, oh, Megan, like everybody here knows how to cook with wood. We'll be okay. You plant some food if food doesn't come in, because the shelves in the stores were also getting kind of low, and there were days there were like shortages of bread and like less rice and less things on the shelves. So it was really intense to see all that unfold. But there was this calm here of like, we don't get used to things we don't need. So I learned a lot about that, and I learned a lot about our adaptability as humans, and I learned a lot about gratitude for what we do have and how much we take for granted. I mean, I think I've explained that before as a concept, but what's coming to my mind is that wisdom comes from experience. We can think we know things, but until we live them on our skin, like that's where real wisdom unfolds. And knowledge is usually through another person's account. It's information. It's information that we can know here. But to actually live in and experience it with your whole body, to start the fires in the rain, cooking, and be like, this is literally just how people live. And the thing is, I started realizing how much time and energy and effort and our muscles we were using to do basic things for survival. And I get how people get into a survival mode and get into a lack mode, and they can't even think about tomorrow because you have so little time and energy by the time all of the basic things are done, of hand washing clothes, hanging clothes to dry, starting up the fire, walking your dishes out to the thing, hoping the water's working, trying to clean the dust out of your house, trying to keep your kids clean. And I just have so much more compassion for people that have lived in poverty for generations, because once that becomes your day-to-day routine, it is so hard to think ahead. It's so hard to think, how do we get out of this? How will we make this easier for ourselves? So it was really kind of shocking to see that. And let's see. Yeah, we learned a lot about our own inner strength. We came together as a family a lot. We had a lot of challenges, and we almost saw this year as like a pilgrimage where we hadn't quite gotten to we didn't quite get to our destination. It felt sort of like we were living in this like little Conestoga wagon, like venturing out west, and didn't find the land, but just, it felt very temporary, and yet it also felt like a purgatory. That's the only way I can describe it. That like, it felt like this place where we held and shed and got down to the most raw and vulnerable and difficult parts of ourselves, of our story as a family together. And we would see old patterns arrive, and they'd be in these very challenging day-to-day situations. And it felt like it was time to learn the lesson. It was time to clean out old patterns and old stories that didn't work for us. So there was a lot of personal growth. There was a lot of coming together as a family. There was a lot of conflict and frustration. And so I won't say like, oh, it was all gratitude and butterflies. Like, it was so hard. And I had another friend who was like, don't get stuck in the transition zone. And yet being able to be in the transition zone and find the joy and the beauty and the peace and the bliss and the discomfort of the transition zone, I felt like that's why we were there for so long, because I think that everything's in transition after this. Like, This was the biggest one that I've ever experienced, but to be able to sit in that level of discomfort and still show up and still have clarity was a lot of learning, a lot of learning. So yeah, I shared one day that a lot of the mantra for this year was chop wood, carry water, and like, what does it look like to just show up for the base needs and value and see them and be with them for the base human needs, and as a meditation, as a showing up in presence, and for what is valuable, what is necessary, what is absolutely the base stuff. Now that said, we also decided we don't really want to live like that forever, and we don't have to live like that forever, and there is still electricity out there, and there is still internet, and that those things have incredible benefit. And so we had gone to the project, and they were just so happening to look for people to help them with our skills, ironically, helping with some social media, helping with fixing things, and those are two things that we do, and helping bring in some ecotourism to their project to be able to share all the things that they're doing here. And it was just really in line with both of what Eric and I already could do and had experience doing. We ran a guest home in the Sacred Valley for years, and so it was kind of just perfect and synchronistic, and felt right, and it opened up pretty quickly. And it's been a transition to move again and to see it with fresh eyes, to go into that same room. We moved here. We moved here from a 4-bedroom house and a kitchen and a big yard in a bustling little town. And it felt so small, and I remember kind of panicking, where's our stuff gonna go? How are we gonna live like this? And then we moved into our tiny house, that felt like we were just living in crowds of stuff and dirt. And then to move back here felt like it was absolutely enormous and huge. This is my Liam. He came to visit. He's been watching from the window. You can hang out here if you want. I'm finishing up. Oh, you're hiding. So, yeah, I think the other big thing that we learned this year is like, the things that we take for granted, if they were all to kind of disappear, like, we would be able to show up, we would be able to do it. And something about that gave me peace. It gave me happiness to know. And I think that sometimes people would go into a panic or into a triggered situation if they were in the same. And I was like, I totally get why people wouldn't do this. I completely understand why people wouldn't just move out to the jungle. And we are hoping to help transition that and bridge that possibility so it doesn't have to be so extreme and so wild and so raw. But yeah, let's see. So now what's next? We're here at the project Muyu. All right, let's keep our hands down because that is where it's filming. See the little dot? So we're going to build together. We're going to figure out how to work together. There's a lot of figuring out shared space and needs and communication. And so we have lived with other people before, but we've been sort of the owners of the house. What you doing? I don't want to do that. I don't want to hurt you. So from here we build. From here we figure it out. And from here we come together and share resources. We're already, oh, buddy, oh, that's too intense. We share resources. We're already sharing the water filter. We're sharing gas, and we're sharing so much. And they've just been absolutely wonderful. And we're so excited to work with them, be part of their bigger family, and Liam, and offer what we have up in our experiences and our knowledge. I think the other thing is that I feel like for a long time I kind of felt like an outsider here, and I wanted to not be an outsider. And yet, I also realized I will always have my outside perspective, and I'm grateful for that. And I think that there's a purpose for all of it, and that I've learned to kind of embrace both worlds a lot more this year. Not with judgment, not with criticism, but like the balance of meeting each one of us where we're at. So I know that this is a really kind of extreme move for most of you guys out there. But I think the learnings that we can get of the things that can benefit us, the ways that we look at things, the way that we value things, can be for anybody. And even if it's getting outside more, I will say being outside has helped our health. I will say Eric's looking really skinny right now because he's been doing so much work in the hot sun and figuring out meals and stuff. Like, we're just getting back to eating well again. Hard to explain, but he's it has affected us certainly. And I keep kind of losing my train of thought because so much happened this year. I did try to have some notes so it would make sense. I'm just going to go back through and see if I missed anything. We are more financially sorted now. It was a very challenging year to see how to live and what we prioritize, which was another thing we learned. The other thing that I'll say is that I went into shock for about 2 or 3, 4 months, where I couldn't even quite function in the same way, and of the heat and the bugs, and like I said, feeling lost in one of my posts, just really not knowing where I would step in and feel like me here. And I will say that that's something that I have discovered a lot this year, which has been really, really good. So, yeah. Feel free to ask questions if I can do a follow-up on other questions that you guys might have. I'm down to it. I do post a lot on social media, and I do think that I'm going to be doing more updates and more sharing now that we've got some resources and some places to work that are a bit easier. That is why I haven't been posting this year. It's just been not the priority. It's not been the priority. So, yeah. Thanks for listening. Thanks for sending us love and having interest in our crazy journey so far. And big hug from Peru. Love you. Ciao.